Hello, I'm Mike Buchanan,
Great.
the leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them. I'm also the conference director, and the conference is going sensationally well, I'm very pleased to say. My co-host today is a wonderful German MRA, Philip Tanzer, who lives in the far north of Scotland. Any further, and I think you're in the sea, Philip, is that fair to say? Okay. Philip's a member of Gender Parity UK, a group of MRAs who are doing some great work. And my interview of him with Elizabeth Hobson will be published at 2 p.m. today, followed by his Q&A at 3 p.m. We have a very, very, very special interviewee today, a beautiful young Spanish MRA by the name of Valentina Ortiz. Her popularity on social media, including YouTube, must make almost every MRA in the world green with envy. Valentina, I wonder if you could say something about how do you achieve this absolutely stellar internet presence? I mean, I think you have more than 200,000 YouTube followers, and I'm just wow. You know, I would chew off a foot, or my own foot, to get that kind of number. So please tell us how you do it.
Well, I think I've been doing this for 6 years already. So I think I started my YouTube channel in a moment that was crucial, that were people needing someone to say this out loud, that were when all these, if you allow me the word, this kind of dictatorship, this gender dictatorship started, people are afraid of speaking out on feminism, speaking out on male issues, on speaking out of how the laws are getting against them more and more and more. So on one side, I think that was the right time to speak about the right things, who people needed to hear, who people needed to even share, to put their thoughts into someone else's words. And also, I was telling to you before, the thing that I'm a woman, I think it helps a lot, because we are right now in a moment that people are more willing to listen to women than to listen to men. So find that these men in Spain and in Argentina and all the Spanish community, Spanish-speaking community, they feel like they need to see a woman empathizing with them. Seeing a woman that understands them, that listens to them, that sees them, that it's not happening. It's very rare to see a woman trying to empathize with male issues and male problematics. So I think that mixing the right moment, the right time, and the right words, the fact that I'm a woman, plus the format I use, that it's not a paper that it's super long and super tedious for someone to read. They can make their dinner, sit in the sofa and watch a video when they're gonna get entertained, and at the same time they are getting understand, and they are learning from problematics they don't know, or they are starting to learn now. So yeah, I think that's the answer.
I couldn't agree more with all of that, especially the entertaining part of it. I mean, a lot of too much of what we put out is repeating what everyone knows, and it's talking to the converted. And Philip, over to you.
Yes, I have to say, I was so impressed by your video. I absolutely loved watching it, and I was terrified by how fast feminism is sweeping through Spain, but I think it is also happening in parts of the Latin American world in a very similar veracity, I would say. And I have a question that I hope you won't find offensive.
I don't.
Is the temperament of Spanish and Latin American women part of the reason why feminism in these countries is so aggressive and gaining so much momentum? Because I think that, and I would say the same is the case for you. You are full of temperament. You have so much energy, and I see Latin American, Italian, and Spanish feminists, I see them as more aggressive than, for example, Swedish, British, or German feminists. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we can make a very extensive psychological study of how this is working and why is it like that. But I think there's a lot of variants that have place here. For one side, I think that Spain, also to add it to Latin American countries, they are in general terms more insecure than other countries on Europe. Then the levels of violence is bigger here in Spain and in Latin American countries that is in other countries of Europe. So that creates the idea that the violence that women suffer against them by men is bigger than it actually is. They find it like it's an exclusively women problem, when if you see the numbers, you can see that there is more violence in every single part of society in Spain or Latin American countries that it is in the United States, the UK, or other European countries. So when you have more numbers of violence in general, there are more, I feel like there is more, it's more likely that a radical group of women start to think that that kind of violence, it's because of men and not because of a general climate of violence that we are managing. So I think that's part of the problem. Also, in Spain and Latin America, I think it's going to happen something similar that we were talking about, I mean, a couple of minutes before. That is that women, I feel like women in Spain, in Latin America, and also Italy, as you mentioned, are more, it has more character, as you said. They are more outgoing. So at the point that these abuses start to affecting men and men start to speak out about those things that affect them, it is most likely that those women reacts to that words of men with more violence that they were doing in some other countries, maybe, because that's part of the cultural expectations of women, that women are like, you know, very outgoing. And you see it also in the fictions. If you can see, I don't know, I put you in a simple example, Modern Family, this TV show that was very popular a couple of years ago. They show you a Latina woman being super outgoing and she regenting everything. And she was like the boss of the family. And those kind of things, that actually happens in Latin American countries. It's not a cliche, it happens.
Okay, we come to a question from Tom Caulfield, the amazing man who's been behind all the videos since the 2016 conference. Absolute hero of mine, and to many others. Tom says, hello, Valentina, love your work. Will airline crew now be paid the same as pilots?
Well, that is very likely to happen, as I told in my talk, when I give you the example that the people who clean windows 60-meter high are now have to be paid the same as the women who mops the floor in an office. Not because not because they are starting to pay those men less, but because they think that women that mops the floor have the same risks and the same capacities and the same responsibilities that the man that is risking his life on the cleaning the window. So yeah, that now in Spain, it is a fact that women and men on those different jobs has to be paid the same. Because if they give you an observation, they go to your office, to your company, and see how you're paying your employees, and they see you are paying less to the woman who mops the floor than the man who cleans the windows, they are gonna giving you a big thing, I don't know the name, to pay.
Okay, we have in the UK, so sorry Philip, just want to make one quick point. In the UK, we're moving in the direction of checkout workers in shops, you know, who scan the food, and then, you know, that they're paid the same as warehouse workers. And of course, warehouse workers are very often on night shifts, you know, in cold or freezing warehouses, depending on the produce. And while these women are sat on their backsides going, you know, that's it. But it's coming. It's coming.
Well, it's very important to say it's not just women sitting in the front. It's also men. It's not like the people on the checkout are just women. It's just
but it's female dominated. Maybe 90%.
Exactly. If I understand it correctly, to go back to the question about the pilots and the stewardesses, the pilot obviously has higher qualifications, but because in the Spanish law, if I understood that correctly in your talk, because in Spanish law now, human interaction is seen as an equal qualification, and the stewardesses have to work with people.
Oh, God.
I'm working with people is pretty much the same as going through year-long training as a pilot. Am I interpreting?
Exactly, yes, because Spain considers that what is important here is to know if two jobs aren't on the same, or not the same value, has or not the same value. That is not the same capacity, the same abilities, the same schedule, the same risks. No, just the same value. So here is gonna get to the context when we are talking about the pilot and the woman who's through the plane helping and stuff. I don't know the name. They're gonna have the same value because both jobs have the goal to get the passengers to another country through a plane. So those are the things that are incredible. That it's almost shaming telling this to people in other countries. It's ridiculous. I don't know how to even explain it.
Don't worry, we're not far behind. And I've got a follow-up question. That's a question from me. Obviously, that will potentially lead to a closing of the imaginary pay gap, because if you overpay women,
yes,
in that case, I would say it's overpaying. If you overpay women, then it would close the wage gap. Do you think that if that wage gap or earnings gap is closed, do you think we would see more equality in, for example, divorce cases? Or do you think that as soon as there is more equality in divorce cases, that feminists would change the law again to gain their power in the custody battles and divorce cases back? Do you understand the question? Sorry.
Yes, I understand the question, and I sadly I have to say I don't think so. I don't think so, because recently it was a sentence here in Spain of a case of custody battle where the woman was unemployed, living in a church with her mom in a village with 300 people. Mm-hmm. And the man was living, the father was living in a very well city, having a very well paid job, having access to medical centers, to schools of quality and stuff. And obviously the best option for the kid was living with his father, who has a job, who can afford raising him right, who was near to centers, medical centers, to schools, that would be able to have activities, meet other kids, etc. Things that living in a village with 300 people in a church you would not have. the court decided to give the custody to the mother, because they understand it on gender perspective that you cannot give the custody to the father because the father was too busy to take care of the kid, because they were working, he was working and he was living in a city, and he would have more things to do, so he could not raise a child. But if you give the kids to the unemployed mom, that's not a problem, because that can give the money, be the cash up format, and that's it. That's all you need. The kid stays with the mom. It doesn't matter that mom is unemployed. Dad can give the money, and that's it. It's resolved. And actually,
in that regard, I think we have similar standards, unfortunately, here in the UK.
Yeah.
Mike, would you like to ask the next question?
Yes, I would. I'll just make a quick point. Going back to the checkout staff versus warehouse workers. Supermarkets are closing those checkouts, as a response. So it's leading to female unemployment, which is quite interesting. I've actually for years now done my own checking out, and I save time. The idea there of, they're anyway similar. If I walked into a warehouse and started driving a forklift truck, I could kill people, including myself. The idea they're equivalent is nothing short of obscene. Okay, let's come to a very interesting question, I think, from Sean G. Valentina, was there ever a moment when Spain actually voted for anything you've revealed, or has this all come in by stealth?
Well, it was a point. I think the start was in 2004. They take out the integral gender violence law. That is this law that I talked in my talk of the last year in 2020, when they took as proof of charge the mere testimony of the victim, right? So I think that when this law came out, it was a big debate because some of them find it unconstitutional, and a lot of political members signed a manifest speaking about this law and what can give us for the rest of the years, and how it's gonna affect to men's rights. And when that happened, a lot of they went on another debate about its constitutional on this law and etc. And it's curious how on that day, a lot of people that were fundamental to not allow this law to come out, for some reason they couldn't go. And even one of them, it's incredible, but one of them suddenly died that morning. Or the night before, I don't remember. But then votes weren't enough to declare it unconstitutional. Yeah. So I think that was the start of it. And a lot of people who signed that manifest on that moment, speaking out about this law, saying that this law was totally unconstitutional, people who signed that manifest years ago today are applauding that law.
Wow.
So they are on that side. Yes.
Wow, that's shocking.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is from Ken Jolivet. Hello, Valentina. Great talk. Shocking. How did all of this happen and so fast? Was it COVID? Spain's reaction to it was terrible. Safetyism, female motherly response, and tyrannical smothering mother behavior. Or was it a female reaction to the macho Spanish man? Were Spanish men really that bad in the past?
Well, that's curious because no, it wasn't that bad. You see numbers of domestic and gender violence in different countries, and Spain doesn't show up like one of the most violent countries in Europe. I mean, it has a more, it's more insecure. You have maybe more people unemployed. It's, I dare to see to say that Spain is even poorer than other countries in Europe. And that's a reality that comes in with some violence, of course. But it wasn't a number, I don't know, an extremely big number on domestic violence or or partner violence that came up with all this. And it wasn't COVID either. This was happening before COVID, and COVID worked to make it more urgent to the eyes of people. During COVID quarantine, one of the things that came out was that women went to fill out lawsuits less because they were on quarantine, but they call to the number of gender violence much more. And that's curious because they can know that because there is a number for gender violence, but there is not a number for domestic violence. There is a number for victims in general that can be victims or of anything that works Monday to Friday from 9 to 3 p.m. I think that is. And the number for the victims of gender violence works every day, every single hour, 24 hours a day. So the only thing that COVID did was giving extra data, extra information that is, of course, biased data, because they don't even care on recollecting the true data to keep impulsing this discourse. When you see Spain is doing I don't know how, polls in schools, they are doing polls to students to see if they suffered or not domestic violence or gender violence in their relationships. Teenagers, okay, we are talking about teenagers. These teenagers received, if they were men, they received a poll that all the questions was if they were the aggressor, if they were the bad guy. And the polls that girls received were as a victim. I mean, if you have a boy and a girl going to the same school, to your girl, they are going to ask if a man sometime checked her phone or view her social media. But to your boy, they are going to say, did you sometime check your girlfriend's phone without her consent, for example? So it is impossible to know.
We have the same approach here in the UK. It's not from the schools yet, but it's from organizations that go into schools and fill out these questionnaires. So we have the same very gendered approach that only looks at boys as perpetrators and girls as the victims to boost the numbers.
Exactly. That's the only thing they are doing. So I don't know how it started. I don't know why it started, but I know it started a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, and it's going to more every day. And I think that there is very little more that they can do without, I think if I don't know if I'm realistic or I'm just optimist, because I think that it can go much more forward. At some point, it has to raise the attention of universal organizations to someone, because what is happening here, it can go very much further. It cannot. It's going to explode.
No, because these UN organizations, for example, they're in the same leaning. They follow the same code. They follow the Istanbul Convention, which has the exact same direction. Can I ask you, is there any backlash in Spain apart from you?
Yes. For to be lucky, there is a few people, a few communicators that are talking about this. There is some radio stations that have a more critical point of view. There is a TV channel that is El Toro TV. That is the only one that I dare to say that it's actually criticizing this feminist movement. But of course, they are trying continuously to shadow those kind of channels on TV they continuously try to give them backlash for it. And for example, on communicators, we are maybe 5 or 6 people on YouTube who are talking about this. Maybe we are 3, exactly 3, talking specifically about feminism and main issues. And we continuously have what we call shadow ban. We on social media, we are continuously shadow banned because of our content. They don't kick us out of the platforms, but they don't show up our content, demonetize our content. And when a content is demonetized, it shows up less because it's not part of the interest of the company.
Can I just say, I think I'll come to that. I think it was a Spanish political party who got some coverage in the British press, and I'm sure internationally, with an anti-feminist image
Vox,
of
yes.
Adolf Hitler with lipstick.
Yeah, some sort of thing. That political party, it's called Vox. It's a political party that is showing against the gender violence law, for example. That is their main claim, actually, going against that law. And they radically oppose to this kind of new wave feminism, and they are more of a conservative point of view. But the sad thing, to put it in quotation marks, it would be that for one side they are super mocked off, because they have the image of a very, very conservative, old-style, old-fashioned politics that even a lot of people who oppose to this kind of feminism doesn't agree to. So there is a lot of people that are giving them support only for the gender cause, because they are sick of all that is happening in Spain regarding men's issues. But at the same time, there is a lot of people who oppose to give them support, only because in the rest of aspects are very radical in a conservative way. So that opens a much bigger gap between two sides, two ideological sides. And from my point of view, at least, what I see is that this side of feminism, of misandry, etc., is using them as the excuse because why they exist. They are like, because parties like this that are so conservative and so chauvinist and so fascist exist, it's because we need to be here. So I think it's, you know.
I mean, Spain, of course, historically was a very deeply Catholic country. Yeah. So is Vox and some other parties pro-life?
Yeah, Vox it is. And there are some other parties that are in the middle, that doesn't position it on one side or another, that doesn't speak about it, like is the PP, the Popular Party. And those, of course, those who are extremely left-wing parties aren't. They aren't, how we call, pro-choice.
A question from Land Ray. Is the equal worth approach to pay in Spain another means of bringing about socialism? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a form of it, or it can, at least it can derivate on it. Maybe it is not now, but it can be a start of it, because the value is a very subjective term. What it's valuable for me, it cannot be for you, and vice versa. So when we start to validate these subjective terms of equal value, it's when we start to underestimate merit, for example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Mike,
thank
read the
you.
next question.
Yes. George, a very interesting question from George. What incentives do men have to do the more difficult and dangerous jobs? Is there a trend among men now towards going for cushy jobs and leaving the difficult ones? And I guess implied from that is, who the hell is going to do the difficult ones and dangerous ones? It's not going to be women, is it?
Exactly. Well, I think that would be an amazing thing to do. I think if men have the opportunity to do that, then do it, because it has to be like that. People has to realize that who are progressing our societies are men. I saw an example a couple of days ago about our state also did something called how it's the name, a toys strike, that kids didn't use the toys that are assigned to their gender on that day. And these toys strike that the government organized it has the motto of, if we give kitchens to the little girls when they are little, then when they grow up, with the messages that we are giving to the girls is that they have to take care of the kitchen and stuff. And I said that this same motto, if you reverse it, it's even harder. So for this rule of three, if you give little boys tools since they are 3 years old, what you are telling to that kid is that all the hard work, all the reparating, they are gonna have them to do it. They are the only ones that have to take care of those tasks. So yes, I would love for men to stop if they have the chance and they don't want to do it. Of course, if they want to do it, then go. But if they don't want to do it, don't do that dangerous jobs. Don't do them. And in Spain, what happens is, because it goes up to a point that they have to take those jobs because they are the only jobs that they are offering to them. Yeah. And they have a family to give a plate of food on their tables. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the issue here. So no, men doesn't have a motivation to take those jobs. Men are only obligated to take them because they have no other options.
No, I think that's right. I retired some years ago, but in a business career of maybe 30 years, looking back, I don't think I quite realized it at the time, but I look back now and you think any area where the job basically involves sitting on your backside, tapping away at a computer, it was a female monopoly.
Yeah, some sort of thing.
I mean, women do not want the stressful jobs that feminists want them to have.
Exactly.
And do you happen to know? Just allied to that, in the UK, we have an awful bunch of women called the Fawcett Society. They're a charity. They did a survey in 2015, and they asked men and women if they self-identified as feminists, and only 9% of British women did, and 4% of British men. I cannot believe that they actually published that report, but I quote it almost on a daily basis in the things I do. Has there ever been a survey in Spain of how popular is feminism?
Well, they do some sort of polls about these kind of things or studies, but the thing is that the institutes that do it are untrustable for me, at least. Because, for example, the Reina Sofia Institute made a study this year, an Inform. In that study, it showed up that 20% more of men than last year didn't believe on the concept of gender violence as it is shown. And you see the information, and that came up in all titulars of press. Like 20% more of young men doesn't believe in gender violence. But if you go to look up on that study, what you see is that perception increases in women and in men, but they are only showing up as it is in men. Then you find out that they do maybe they do the research well, but they do the conclusions wrong. For example, they have that women they perceive themselves more as a victims, that men perceive themselves as victimators. I mean, there is a gap between how women perceive they are victims of violence and how men perceive to perpetrate it. So at the end of the day, you have men saying, I never did this, I never did that, I never did those. But women feeling, I totally feel as a victim for being a woman. So where that perception of victim came from? Because men aren't doing things to create it. We see it in that same form. So what is happening in between? What is happening in the education we give to women and to men that gives women the idea that they are constant victims, even when we see the data and the data doesn't correspond with the number of perceived victims.
Yeah.
See.
Thank you very much. Oh, Mike?
Oh, is it me next? Okay, it's just 2 seconds.
Oh, no. I thought you had a question to what she just said. The next question is from Tom, and he said, I think you mentioned you work on a helpline for men. Can you tell us a bit about how these men are feeling when they call in? How do they express themselves?
Well, there are two things. That one is that men have a need to talk for a long time. Those calls they are never shorter than 40 minutes, 1 hour. Wow. They need to speak because they are not feeling listened in anywhere. So they call us, first of all, to be able to speak of what they are feeling. A lot of them doesn't even want to do anything at the moment, just want to be listened. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is on the perception is that men needs to talk. They need to feel listened. Yeah. And on the other side, men have a lot of trouble recognizing themselves as victims of domestic violence. They come telling us, my wife did that, my wife did this, my wife said this to me. And they told you things that are horrible, that any woman would quickly understand as violence, as domestic violence. But you speak to them and they don't realize that they are victims of domestic violence. You do tell to them, this is domestic violence. You are living with your abuser, that it is. And they are saying, well, maybe she's not an abuser. Maybe I did something, I speak in a way she didn't like, or I bother her, or maybe she's dealing with some hard things in her personal life and she's not telling me. Things that we never see at the opposite side. And when it happens on the opposite side, everyone says, that's not a justification, that is wrong, no matter the context, that is wrong. Men doesn't feel that way when it happens to them.
No, they will feel responsible for being abused.
Exactly. They will feel responsible and they will first think that they did something wrong, that the other person, that woman, is doing something wrong to them. And
oh, sorry.
A lot of, and just one thing before I finish with this question. One fundamental difference I saw is that women are more interested in filing a lawsuit when they find themselves being victims of domestic violence than men. Men just want to go out of that situation. They don't care about if that woman pays off for what she did, if she goes or not to prison, she pays off or not. They just want peace. They just want to get out of that abused situation. And that's it.
Here in the UK, you get financial help in cases of separation, of divorce, when you claim there was domestic abuse. And since that was introduced, the numbers of claims of domestic abuse in divorce cases, as far as I know, have quadrupled. Do you have something similar in Spain, that people get support if they claim abuse?
Well, what it happens here, it's this problem with the integral gender violence law, that it understands that your ex-wife or your ex-husband, for example, what it's gonna have is that the kid's custody, for example, goes to you, to the woman automatically, for the years that it took to resolve that issue, and then see the custody battle. And in the custody battle, they will say, this kid has been for the last 4 years with his mother, so the best thing for him is to stay with his mother.
And
for
it
example.
gives a chance for parental alienation, of course, as well.
Of course, on all those 4 years. And now they are suspending they changed the civil code, article number 94. Now, a man that is denunciated, that is victim of a false allegation, from now on, they will not have access to a visitations regime. It's what I told in the talk. So yeah, what happens is, if you file a lawsuit against your ex-partner during a divorce, you're gonna have the custody, you're gonna have the kid not seeing the father at all, and you're gonna have an assistential money that it's I think it's 450 euros. Monthly, of course. But now on, since what I told you before, since now on, every person who can be considered victim of gender violence, just with going to the office and saying that you are thinking about filing a lawsuit against a man, they are going to give you that financial support anyways.
We absolutely shocking.
Sorry, we have perhaps 7 or 8 minutes left. Sean G asked an interesting question. Is Spain restrictive or permissive, or somewhere in between, around sex work and pornography? How much sex shaming is directed towards Spanish men?
Well, it's more than another thing, restrictive, I say. It were a couple of years, maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, when it was more progressive about this subject. But now, right now, it's very restrictive. It has a criminalizing point of view of the men who consume sex work, for example, or pornography. And even they are starting to make institutional programs and campaigns to stop the consume of pornography on young men, for example, in between other things.
I'm actually in favor of that.
Well, in other things, for example, what they are doing is, in case of sexual work, when women are offering their sexual services to men, it's not women who is, even though prostitution is it's not legal, it's not women who is who is having the delictive act, but the men who are consuming the services.
And that of course is known. It's known as the Scandinavian model here, and so it's fascinating that it's also in Spain.
Yeah.
And it's obviously the complete opposite to, for example, drug dealing, where the drug dealer is the one who is the criminal and the consumer usually is being let off. So
exactly. That's and I'm not particularly against sex work or anything, but I see that it doesn't make any sense, because in any other penal act and any other crime, you arrest everyone who is involved. You arrest who produce it, who consumes it, who promotes it, everyone. But in this case, it doesn't happen.
We've got 4 more questions, so let's try to get through them relatively quick. We only have a few minutes left. The next one is from Ken. His question is very interesting. What does the older generation think about all this?
Well, older generation of men are very against this kind of new feminism, this kind of I don't like to separate new and old feminism, because old feminism, I have some criticism to them. But there is a lot that see these advances against men rights, and a lot of older men are against it. But it happens in these last years that all women also was against all this, but in the last year they triggered a little more, they targeted that group a little more from feminism. They are going to them. So they are appealing to what women, when they were younger, feel, and how they could not do some things and stuff. And there are a lot of, it's incredible, but there are a lot of old women filing lawsuits against their husbands when they shared maybe 60 years of their lives.
Wow.
It's incredible. Yes.
Mike.
Yes, an interesting question from Land Ray. Women see themselves as victims and want men to be labeled as abusers. Men naturally want to see themselves as protectors of women and other men as abusers. Women manipulate this to divide men and prevent men from joining together against women when women pose a threat to men as a group. Any thoughts on this?
Bueno, in our association, we can see that every day we have men getting fun of association for abused men. And that's completely irrational to me. I cannot understand it, because I'm against feminism, but I'm not against a foundation who is helping victims of domestic abuse. I mean, if there's a woman who was victim of domestic violence, of course I will give her my support, as I do to men. But there is some men that are against an association who dedicates to help abused men. We are not talking about abusers men. We're talking about abused men. It's almost like they don't understand the difference.
No.
If there's the word men involved, it must be an abuser.
Yeah.
Do you already have the white ribbon campaign in Spain? In Australia and here in the UK, it's a campaign for men to address male violence against women and girls. It's an extreme feminist, male feminist movement, and it's very harmful. They cause a lot of problems, in my opinion, here. Do you already have that?
Well, we have some particulars that act like that, but they are not a cohesive group yet. So I'm very glad for it.
The next question from Sean. This is quite an historical political question. How significant is the legacy of Franco?
Well, it is quite significant, because people, even though in the practice we don't see it's some sort of legacy, if you wanted to call it somehow, but we do see it constantly in the discourse. Even though I filmed a video a couple of weeks ago on the 25th of November, that was the day against violence against women internationally, and it was some women's rally in Madrid. So I went there to ask questions to the manifestants, and I asked a feminist man, about why he was there, etc. And I started to ask him about our association and what he thinks an association for men's abuse can promote without people thinking they're some sort of oppressor men and stuff. And what he said is that the discourse of an association for abused men was Franquista. It comes from Franco. Yeah. And that is incredible, because of course Franco's was a dictatorship, and they are comparing a foundation dedicated to help abused men to a dictatorship. It's incredible. They are using it.
And do you think that the other side, the feminist side, are they using any of the structures that were used in Franco's time?
They don't need it. Okay. I think they are doing some sort of things like that, but they don't need to use it them. For example, one of the things that happened during Franco's dictatorship was the censorship that was for literature and for things that people can consume. These things, the same things, are happening right now. There is a censorship, an obvious censorship on some subjects, but it's not the state who is doing it. It's the social media and it's people. The social media and I was reading a book who talked about the censorship on Franco's dictatorship, and one of the things that the book was calling out is that a lot of book writers on that time all of them should send their books to revisation to an agency that would allow that book or not to be published. So what people did was starting to auto-censorship themselves. So they knew how this agency worked, and to avoid that, to avoid it the maximum wave, they did that censorship to their books before they send it to revision. Yeah. And that is happening right now. We cannot say some sort of things on YouTube if we don't want that YouTube take us our channel.
Valentina, sorry, we have 1 minute left, so I'd just like to get one more question in. My thanks to Sean G for this. I looked through a list of 34 Spanish political parties this morning. Wikipedia identifies only one as feminist, and then he writes more for Mallorca. So I suppose that's a party name. Does that say...
No, I think he meant that there are more parties in Mallorca that identify as feminist.
Right, but he's saying only one Spanish party identifies as... So I don't know if that says more about Wikipedia than it does about Spanish political parties.
Well...
But we have 30 seconds.
I don't know what's the party that shows up there, but the party that is ruling the government right now and identifies as a feminist government is the PSOE, PSOE. And that's the information I can give.
That's wonderful. Well, Valentina, I think anybody that was just the most wonderful Q&A. I think anybody who has watched this Q&A or the preceding video will understand extremely well why you are so popular on social media. That was absolutely delightful, fascinating, informative, funny at times. Everything that makes you the sort of internet sensation that you are. So thank you so much for this, and
thank you so much.
Contributing last year.
I'm much cooler in Spanish.
In that case, we all must learn Spanish. And thank you, Philip, for co-hosting again. And so your interview with Elizabeth and myself is up next, and in an hour's time we return for you to ask yourself questions.
Exactly. So all the attendees that are watching now, you can already prepare questions for me that you can ask me in 1 hour.
And with that, we have to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody involved in this.
Thank you so much.
Bye now. Bye-bye. Thanks, Valentina.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was great.
Enjoyed it too.
Bye-bye.